Alright, what's up everybody, Mr. Mir here, and we are back today in our video series of GitHub for Teacher, GitHub Basics for Teacher, GitHub Basic Classroom for Teacher, or whatever it's called, I forget, I don't have it open right now. But we are back with that series, and we are going to do videos on auto-grading. I was asked to do some videos on auto-grading, and instead of doing one video on auto-grading, I need to show you the setup to get to that last video. So we're going to have 2 videos and then a video on auto-grading. So the next 3 videos are going to be on this idea of auto-grading. First video here is going to be setting up a Maven project, because that's how I do all my auto-grading. Next video will be setting up unit test in Java, and then the last video will be connecting all the auto-grading together. I said I'm going to do everything with Maven, the Maven tool, because that's what I'm most comfortable with. However, you could also do this with Gradle. So if you're comfortable with the Gradle tool, you can go through this whole process with Gradle, and then you can do auto-grading with Gradle as well. I'm going to do Maven, and I'm also going to do it all inside a text editor and doing file and folder structure using File Explorer, Finder, whatever you're on, you can do it with that. You don't need an IDE. Normally I do everything in the IDE, set up the Maven projects, etc. If your IDE offers it, you might want to do that, but I'm going to do everything in a text editor here with basic file structure to show that it's possible. You don't need to have an IDE to do all this, to run all this. We can type it all out, push it up to GitHub, let GitHub do all the work, so we don't need the IDE. But if you have one, please use it. It makes things a lot easier. To begin, I'm going to open up text editor. I'm going to use Sublime Text here, and I'm going to go into a folder. So let's open up a folder in Sublime Text. Let's go open folder. Do I have a folder? I do. Okay, so we'll do that. And inside here, let's make my window a little bigger right now. Inside here, I'm going to save this empty file immediately, and I'm going to call it pom.xml. So I'm going to go File, Save, and I'm going to navigate to that folder, and it's going to be called pom.xml. So every Maven project needs a Pom file. Now this Pom file is where all the kind of setup stuff happens for Maven. I'm going to copy in a Pom file here. This Pom file will be shared on the GitHub repository. It will also be in the link description below, so you can copy whatever we end up with and change what you need to. First thing here, don't touch anything up here. This comes right from Maven. We don't touch it. Next section, the 3 lines. This is where we can start changing things. The first thing is our group ID. Group ID uniquely identifies our project in a series of projects. Basically, since we're inside our classrooms, we can be kind of creative with this stuff since we're not in an organization where we have exact naming structures to follow for projects. Group ID, though, should follow Java's package naming, meaning you go top domain downwards to follow it. So I have com.csa.demos. You might have com.csa.unit1 or whatever. The next one, artifact ID. This is basically what our jar file should be called without a version given. However, again, when having custom naming here, we have a little more flexibility. The only rule that I recommend or that you should follow is all lowercase letters and no weird symbols. If you have spaces, use dashes. Third one, version. We can again be as creative as we want with this. Something that I usually try to do is like quest number, lesson number, unit number. So that's kind of a version styling that I have set up, but you can come up with your own. Again, doesn't really matter. The next part is our dependencies. Now our dependencies are going to, I'm not going to go into great deal, but basically we're going to use a dependency to allow us to run unit tests. Now I have a dependency in here written this way, which probably is not the best way to have this written. It just works for me. I've never had any errors with it, but actually let's delete this word engine, because realistically we should probably write it that way. And if this doesn't work, we will change this to be 5.4.2 if 5.6 does not work. So that's the only dependency that we need. So that allows us again to run our unit tests that we're going to be building. The next one is the build section. So that comes underneath dependencies. And again, this will be pasted out already, or it will be in the description / on the repository. So you can just copy and paste. You don't have to do this yourself, but make sure you change like this and this to match, especially if you make it in an IDE. I know I'm starting to ramble here, but if you make it in an IDE, most IDEs ask you what you want to call your group ID, what you want to call your artifact ID, and what you want to call your version number. So they will set this up for you automatically. So don't change it. But if you're not using an IDE, then you can change it to be whatever you want. But then this stuff you'll need to paste into your IDE. So in our build, we have our plugins section. So we have our build tag, then our plugins tag, and then we have our specific plugins that we're using here. We're using compiler and Surefire. So the Maven compiler plugin just is allowing our code to compile to run, essentially to compile the code and so we can be able to run it later. If you do not include this plugin, if you leave this out or delete it, it does exist in the Maven super Pom file. So that will get kind of pulled in automatically, and you probably don't need this plugin unless you're going to change something from the default that's in the super Pom. And we are actually changing something in the default for the super Pom. I believe it is still using Java 1.6, I believe is the default in there. So I like to update it to 1.8. What you do need to realize is that whatever you write here, 1.8, 11, 12, 1.6 does not need to match the JDK that's on your machine. So they don't need to be the same. This is what Maven's going to run your code as when it runs your project. So you don't need to have the same one matching, but just be aware if you're using like Java 11 and you're doing things that only exist in 11 and you're saying my source and my target are 1.8, you could have some potential issues when trying to run that stuff. If it's thinking you should be 1.8 and you're doing stuff that's exclusive to to Java 11. The last one that we have here is our Surefire plugin. Now this basically goes and finds all our test files, any file that we create that ends with a test or, you know, starts with a test, the word test specifically, or test plural, if it ends with that, or test case or things like that. It goes and looks for a bunch of stuff and it finds the stuff that we need. That's the simplest explanation, even though that probably didn't make a lot of sense unless you are kind of comfortable with this already. The great thing about Maven is you can go look up any of these plugins and there's amazing detail and documentation on their website about what all this stuff does and changes that you can make. There is another plugin that you might want to use if you do integration testing. It's the failsafe plugin, but we're not going to look at that one here. So the last thing that we're going to do to end this video is we're going to finish our folder structure for this Maven project. Now, the folder structure is inside our main folder. I'm going to make a new folder. Now, I'm doing this right in Sublime Text, but you could do this inside Finder or File Explorer. So I'm going to have a folder in here called SRC, and then inside the SRC folder, I'm going to have a folder called main. Inside the SRC folder, I'm going to have a second folder called test, singular. And then inside the main folder, I'm going to have a folder called Java. And inside my test folder, I'm going to have a folder called Java. And that's kind of where I stop. I don't do any subfolders in there inside the Java folders. Where you would have subfolders inside Java is if your Java files belong to a package. If they belong to a package, you would have subfolders. Like if I had a package called like com.demo.tutorial.project and my Java files for whatever reason existed in that package, then inside my Java folder, I would have a subfolder for com. Inside the com folder, I would have a subfolder demo. Inside the demo folder, I would have a subfolder tutorial. Inside tutorial, I would have a subfolder project. Inside project would be all my Java files, but I would need a subfolder for each domain of the package name inside this Java that's in the main and inside the Java that's in the test. So I would need it for both. But we're going to end the video there. When we come back, I'm going to actually have more in this project. I'm going to have a README and a git ignore already, and then we'll go through. I'll probably also have a basic Java file inside here as well. And then we'll go through the rest. But I don't want to make this video run any longer. So until next time, everybody, have a week.